for the talks this morning. They've been fantastic. Suddenly a little beach ball kept going around on my screen just before I was about to speak, but I'm here now. So I'm not sure whether I've been introduced or not, but my name is Heather Brunskell-Evans, and I research the links between prostitution, pornography, surrogacy, and transgenderism, all of which are related obviously to women's bodies. But today I'm talking about the colonization of the female body with regard to transgenderism. And I'm going to use a metaphor, I think, which was used by someone earlier, of empire, taken from a work by Janice Raymond, first published 40 years ago now, called The Transsexual Empire. So in the 1980s, when Raymond was researching, men who identified as women had hormone treatment and genital surgery. Today, as many of you know, the majority of men who identify as women retain their genitals and now reject the idea of hormone intervention. So 2 years ago, I shared a platform with somebody who disagreed with me about feminism. Feminism, she argued, is no longer needed. She produced a list of ways in which girls and women enjoy equal rights to education, work, opportunities, equal pay, control over our bodies in relation to access to contraception, termination of pregnancy, and so on. And I agree that women have these rights in liberal democracies, and it would be a mistake to reject those as if the lot of women has never changed. It clearly has. But what goes along with women's rights is a powerful patriarchal social structure that has existed for millennia, but that takes different forms depending on the historical context. So, and this patriarchal structure is men's colonization, appropriation, and ownership of female sex bodies. And this has been eloquently spoken about by previous speakers. But ironically, what is unique about transgenderism is that this current men's appropriation is executed by denying women's bodily reality. And this is what we have to focus on if we're going to get to the bottom of this. So when a trans woman requires liberal democratic society to accept that he has a woman's soul, that he's had it as he emerged from his mother's womb or even before it, and consequently has to share all spaces designated for women, he's helped in exercising this illiberal coercive power over women through a constellation of democratic institutions, forces, and discourses which actually sign up to women's equal rights. And it was the creation of the Gender Recognition Act in 2004 that was the historical point at which inner identity, not biological sex, was first established as the true marker of whether one is a man or a woman. So the idea that gender identity is innate, but that biological sex is somehow culturally assigned, has rapidly established itself as a fact, despite the absence of any underpinning empirical evidence. So now, the claim, incomprehensible 20 years ago, that men who identify as women are women, even though there is no scientific evidence, neuroscientific or otherwise, has now so successfully embedded itself in the public consciousness that belief in this non-fact is seen as emblematic of an inclusive, progressive, democratic society. And in contrast, the mundane statement that people in possession of penises are not women is apparently now so inflammatory that when it is uttered, human rights organizations are ready to dismiss it as bigotry, and mechanisms are set in place such that the police and legal systems can silence or punish this hate speech. Gender identity theory, voiced by our most allegedly open-minded liberal elite, forbids any discussion about sex difference that does not restrict itself to inner identity and feelings. namely the sexist social constructs of femininity that patriarchy constantly constructs and reconstructs to give ideological effect to women's oppression. Like dominoes, each democratic institution has bowed to the human right of men to self-identify as women. A trans-affirmative empire has, by stealth and determination, as well as by vast funding, like the pornography industry, relentlessly campaigned to erase any significance to the two distinct sexes. The empire has spread through the national body politic, medicine, the law, in conjunction with trans activism, government and social policy, and public institutions and big pharma have en masse helped sideline women's biological reality. Examples. Our current Shadow Foreign Secretary, Lisa Nandy, doggedly fights for the rights of male prisoners who identify as women, including those men convicted of rape, to be housed in women's prisons. In other words, men's rights to self-identify as women trumps women's rights to feel protected from men's violence. And while she and other shadow government ministers signed a pledge that women Labour Party members who object to the legislation of self-identification be ejected from the party as transphobes. Simultaneously, the Labour Party has never acknowledged the level of sexually violent threats and harassment that women face when they speak out. Stonewall, for example, has absolute disproportionate influence on our social institutions. The redefinition of lesbians, for example, as those who have gender identity attraction, not same-sex attraction, means that if lesbian women say that they're actually sex attracted to women, these lesbian women are regarded as bigots and transphobes. The Black lesbian feminist barrister Alison Bailey, as we all know, I think at the moment, is currently hoping to bring a judicial review of Stonewall's powers and practices. And the men's rights movement is now so deep at the heart of the feminist movement itself that feminist academics who are deeply versed in uncritically thinking about queer theory and who describe themselves as intersectional call for the no platforming of anyone not converted to the faith that trans women are women, including the no platforming of other women. So, for centuries, women have been silenced almost entirely. That's in the family, in the courts, and in politics, for speaking out against patriarchy. In time-honored tradition, but with a chilling 21st century twist, when feminists today critique the patriarchal status quo, it is we who are alleged to be the extremists for not allowing men's interests to control our narrative. J.K. Rowling is an example of it. She has been absolutely excoriated in social media by the sheer misogyny of a trans activist mob that has insisted, on the one hand, that biological sex is of no significance, but has, on the other hand, has taken every opportunity to utilize threats of male violence specifically enacted on the female bodies, which previously they say are of no significance, to threaten Rowling that if ever they meet her, and it's painful to say this, they will choke her with their lady dicks. Rowling has highlighted what everyone with any knowledge of this sorry debacle knows, that women are reasonable when they point to the possible dangers: access to women's spaces, sport, positions solely reserved for women, such as women's officers and political parties, the medicalization of children on the claim that they're born transgender. The dangers of this are clearly apparent when any man can, for whatever reason, self-identify as a woman and be treated as such for any and every purpose. So, in conclusion, while presented as inclusive and progressive, analysis shows that trans policy capture has already undermined the rights and interests of women and children and is on course to wreak further damage unless stayed. Transgenderism is the Trojan horse that has smuggled the ancient authoritarian rights of men to control women's bodies and the rights of men to control our language. This is deep at the heart of our liberal democracies. But feminists are not being subservient. We are speaking out against this collective madness. Gender critical feminist women are daring to stand out from the collective fear of being accused of transphobia and pointing out that the emperor of transgenderism in reality has no clothes on. And the more we point this out, by standing together, shoulder to shoulder, like the small child in the fable, transgenderism will be exposed and institutions will be able to see it. Thank you very much.